And I'll never forget this, man. I've known Jess for 27 years. We've been married for 20. She sat me down one day. We've got a great relationship. She's never told me before or since what she told me one day. She sat me down. She held my hand. She's like, I need to tell you something. And I'm like, okay. She goes, it's really hard for me to say, and I never thought I would say this out loud. And I've been thinking about it for a really long time. So I know it's true. She's like, but you're losing me. And I'm like, what? And she's and that's not like us. I was like, what do you mean I'm losing you?
An entrepreneur straight out of New York City, Michael Chernow. What's cracking?
What up, y'all? Back again in the studio. Creatures Habit Podcast. I have no idea what episode this is. Somewhere in the early 100s, but I just want to say I'm grateful for you guys for tuning in again. The fact that we've made over 100 episodes for the Creatures of Habit podcast definitely means that we've been doing it for over, or at least 2 years, because I have not missed a week since we started the podcast. So, and what I've heard and what I believe is that consistency is everything. Consistency is everything. So we're going to keep putting out these podcasts, and I can't thank you guys enough for listening. Today's episode is about dad life. Something that I am unbelievably, incredibly, undeniably passionate about. Being a father is, I would honestly say, my greatest joy and accomplishment. Having two boys that I genuinely love and I genuinely feel love me back is unlike anything I can describe into words, really, and I didn't know what it was like until it started happening. So I've got Larry Hagner on the pod today. Larry is, I would call him an expert in the world of fatherhood. He has a podcast called The Dad's Edge, and he's an author. He's got 4 kids. And before he created The Dad's Edge, he was in a very, very different field. And I'm looking forward to hearing that story from him, how he went from medical sales to creating a top dad podcast, or the top dad podcast in the world of podcasts, which, by the way, is very, very hard to do. Audio and podcast is definitely people are taking to it, but it's really, really hard to get people's attention in this world. So the fact that he's got a top podcast in a specific genre is incredible. So I'm really excited to hear from Larry. I want to hear about his story, and I want to get some dad habits. So if any of you dads out there are listening to this podcast, turn the volume up. Now would be the time. Larry, welcome to the show.
Well, hey, man, congratulations on over 100 episodes.
Thank you, dude.
That's awesome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
It's I actually didn't even really think about it until we sat down that we breached over 100 episodes. But yeah, man, I'm following your footsteps.
That's awesome. And I know we were kind of talking before we hit record today, and you were talking about your boys, and it's very obvious that you've got just a heart of gold for your boys. Like, it's obvious just the way you talk about them, your voice tone, like how you describe them, even, and how you describe your wife, which is really, really cool.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I really didn't have a blueprint as a kid. And so if you looked at my childhood, you wouldn't necessarily be able to organically paint the picture of what my family life looks like now. And I think that's interesting and cool and valuable to share, because your past totally can project what your future looks like, or your present, but it does not have to. It does not have to.
Yeah.
Enough about me, man. Let's talk about, I want to hear how, this idea for the Dad's Edge came to be, and why.
So, my childhood was amazing. And, it was about 10 years ago, man, that, it was a Sunday morning, and, I woke up before my wife, and the sun was shining bright, and I opened up the window, and the light just hit my face just right, and suddenly, I was bestowed all the knowledge of what it meant to be a good father, and I just had to share it with the world. So that's completely crap.
I'm like, wait a second, what the fuck?
Oh man, so
you had me, dude.
I did. So do you know? You did. You had that serious look on your face,
man.
As I was saying that, I was like, oh my God, he's actually buying this a little bit. No, it was not. It was not. I don't know about your childhood, but mine was really chaotic. My mom was, if you look at it from a 30,000-foot view, my mom was married 3 times. She dated several guys in between. Every guy was like the same guy, same guy, different name, different face, but abuser, partier, just absolutely toxic and crazy. The crazy thing, though, is that my mom and biological father were married super young. They were like 21. They were married for about 4 years. They had me in 1975. And then like 9 months after I was born, they split up. They had went through a horrible divorce, and he left, and like he was gone. Like I have no recollection of my dad.
You never met him?
Well, I'll get
outside of that.
I'll get to this because the story is a little juicy. So, but I remember, being like 4 years old. I remember being in preschool, and I remember dads coming to pick their kids up, and I knew what a dad was. And I just thought that moms go out and find dads. Like, like somehow we magically appear as kids, and then the mom eventually finds the dad, brings him home, I guess, to the nest. That was my understanding. So you'll appreciate this. I'll never forget being 4 years old, and my mom told me one morning, she's like, hey, I have a very special friend coming over for dinner tonight. I'm really excited for you to meet him, and we've been friends for a while. It's her way of saying she'd been dating somebody she worked with. And I was like, and in my mind, I didn't say it out loud, but I was like, oh my God, she found the dad. Like, that's who she found. So this guy comes walking in our house, and he's got like the handlebar mustache. He's got a briefcase. He's wearing the 3-piece suit. He was a software engineer. And I'll never forget, like, even how I felt as a kid, this guy walking in my home. And it was cold outside. He had a trench coat on, and my mom introduced us, and she said, Larry, this is Joe. Joe, this is Larry. And I shook this guy's hand, and with this big, bright smile, I looked up at this guy, and I said, are you going to be my dad?
Wow. And he was like, and I'm out.
Yeah, he's like, wow. You know what I mean? But like literally, like I remember like he just laughed very awkwardly. I think I actually remember my mom kind of gasping for like, but they did get married 6 months later. They stayed together for 6 years. They got divorced when I was 10, and not to go into too much detail, but it was horrible. Like they fought a lot. Like cops were called to my house. I mean, they beat each other up. He beat me up and beat my mom up, and it was a really bad experience. A couple years go by, and I started asking questions. I'm like, wait a second. Like I knew he came into my life at 4. Where did I come from? I had no idea my mom had been married before. That's when she laid it on me. She's like, I was actually married before, your dad. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, tell me about him and tell me everything. And she did to some degree, but I ended up running into him by accident when I was 12. Crazy. He only lived 3 miles from us. I had no idea, and neither did my mom, as far as I know. Ran into him. He was remarried, 2-year-old son, another one on the way, and I spent like every week with this guy. Like we hung out all the time.
With your dad?
With my dad.
Your biological dad?
Yeah, my biological father. And I was so excited to meet my dad because like I immediately started calling him dad. I still remember the very first day I met this guy. I was so excited to meet this guy. Like you remember Miami Vice? Like, the white suits and the green shirts and all that. Yeah, I actually wore a suit like that when I first met him because I was just like, I want to look my best.
What was his name? Don?
Oh my God, yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, I could see his face, but yeah, he wore suits like that. But so anyway, we connected and we hung out for about 6 months, and then after a while, things just kind of got weird and stressful. Like that's the only way I could describe it. Now that I'm older, the way it felt when we would hang out is I knew something was kind of like just heavy on him. And the best way I describe it now is it's almost like if you're dating a girl and she's not into you anymore and she hasn't told you yet, but you know it's coming. Like that's kind of the feeling in the aura that was going on.
That you were getting?
That I was getting, yeah. And I remember I picked up the phone one day and I called him and I said, hey, what's going on? Like, and he just basically was like, it's me, it's not you. Like I need to, I can't do this right now. It's challenging. So he left. I went through a lot of hard times as a kid, but fast forward, I went to college, met my incredible wife, and we got married, and this is where the story kind of culminates. So I'm 30 years old. This is 18 years ago. I'm in a coffee shop in St. Louis for a business meeting. I was in medical device sales at the time, and a guy walks in the coffee shop, and I just kind of like looked up, and I was like, holy shit, that's my dad. And it had been 18 years. And so anyway, we ended up, it was really interesting how we actually kind of our paths crossed again. But that interaction has now turned into an 18-year relationship with him. He's still married to the same woman. I have 2 younger half brothers. We all get along great. My 4 boys know him as grandma and grandpa and Uncle Grant, Uncle Clay, and everything's good. But how Dad Edge got started was I grew up with literally a laundry list of what not to do, but I didn't know what to do. And I always made a promise to myself when I had kids, because I really want to be a good dad, is I'm never going to hit my kids out of anger, no matter what. I'm never going to spank them, never going to hit them out of anger. And the night I started Dad Edge, I broke that promise. And up until then, my oldest was 6. My youngest at the time was 4. So we're going back, 11 years ago. And my 4-year-old, who's 16 now, stepped out of line, and I spanked him. And I unfortunately spanked him so hard that he hit the ground. And I'll never forget the look on his face when I went, because I knew immediately. Like, I felt terrible immediately. I was like, oh my God, what the hell did I just do? And I go to pick him up, and what killed me the most, man, was he looked at me and he did this.
Oh my gosh.
Like, he kind of was like, please don't hurt me. And I was like, and I literally in that moment, I saw me. And because that's how I was raised with all these jokers that came in and out of my life. They were all heavy-handed. And it was in that night, man, I was like, I'm done. Like, because at the time had a mediocre marriage. I was a mediocre dad. I wasn't the best with patience. I mean, like, I was not connected to my kids. I wasn't connected to my wife, but I desperately wanted to be. And that was the night I was just like, I'm just going to learn. I'm going to learn. Like, there's got to be a way to learn this stuff, just like anything else. And like you, I have a background in health. So, like, I have a degree in sports medicine with a minor in nutrition. So exercise and eating healthy and the body, like, I tell you anything. But I was trained on that. So the past 11, 12 years has been an education, and it's been the Dad Edge. And so not only am I the founder, but I'm a client too.
So what is it? So, I mean, that's a really vulnerable story to tell, dude. That's a really vulnerable story to tell. And I think even me hearing it, because I was definitely the recipient of those situations with my dad where he just, boom, laid in on me hard. And interestingly, you just painted this picture of like your kid, kind of putting his hands up and in fear. And man, it like hit me right in the chest because I recently I was doing this breathwork stuff. I've been doing this breathwork stuff, and what came up for me in the breathwork was me as a 6-year-old kid. In that, literally, I had a vision of myself with my shoulders up to my ears, just stuck in fear. And I was like, oh, that kid has been in my way the whole time. I got to heal that kid. And so when you said that, I feel I'm so, there's what you did, I would imagine, was you like flipped a switch.
I did.
And what was that?
It was a surrender. It really was. I just interviewed, I don't know if you know who Granger Smith is, but he's country western singer, and he lost his 3-year-old son back in 2019. And he talked about this horrible, dark moment where he was going to take his own life because he just couldn't handle the grief anymore. And he said something to me, and I interviewed him just a few months ago. I've done 1,130 interviews now to date. And there are quotes that I remember from people, and his really hit me because it reminded me of my moment as well. Obviously, his was way more drastic than mine. But he basically just prayed. And he was just like, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, but whatever it is, can you just show me what to do? And he surrendered. And the quote that he said is when we surrender, it's power under control. A lot of people think that when we surrender to learning something new or to be enlightened with something or to just take a step into the unknown for something that's going to be good, something that's going to improve our lives, it's scary and it's a surrender, but it's power under control. And it was terrifying, but it was almost like in that moment that I had released like the pressure valve. And the whole thing got started, like I was in my office right after this happened, and I felt terrible and I was emotional and I literally had tears coming out of my eyes, and I was on Facebook because that's what you do as an adult when you have a bad moment. You go on social media and you just start scrolling, right? And I saw this button in the left-hand corner that said create a page. I had never created a page, and I clicked that button. And literally, I didn't even think about it. The words, the Good Dad Project, because that's what the Dad Edge was, 7 years ago, the Good Dad Project. And I was the project. I was like, I wonder if I can just learn patience. I wonder if I can learn connection. I wonder if I can learn like how to be a good husband. Like, I wonder if I can learn these things just as much as I've learned anything else. And it was in that moment that surrender felt scary. It felt like there was a part of me that felt weak, but there was more a part of me that felt relieved. Like, I can actually go make a difference now. But it took that decision, that line in the sand, that moment of surrender to actually get there.
The Dad's Edge or the Good Dad Project, what does it mean from your experience? Over 1,000 interviews talking about, I would imagine, dad-focused things. Not maybe all of the conversations, but that being sort of a foundation of this content. What does it mean to be a good dad?
I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest. Here's what I do know about it. I've written 2 books, 2 that are not published right now. They're going to be published soon. One is The Spirit of Fatherhood, and the other one is The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood. And the publisher that I went through for The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood fought me a little bit on the title. He's like, why not just call this Legendary Fatherhood? I was like, because there's kind of no such thing. I was like, there's the pursuit of it. There's the learning of it. I don't know one person, though, that has ever walked the earth that stood at the top of a mountain saying, I know everything there is to know about being a good father and husband. So I think that being a good father is all about the pursuit of growth, of constantly sharpening the sword of your mentality, your leadership skills, your connection skills, your communication skills, constantly being a student of it, constantly knowing that I don't have this all figured out yet, and to just always be on the lookout for the next lesson. I think good dads, good fathers, great fathers are the ones who are human. Like my boys will tell you that I never hesitate to apologize because that's often. I actually just did an interview with my oldest son, and I had no idea what he was going to say. I didn't give him any words or anything like that. I was like, I just want to have a conversation with you and just talk. And I asked him, I was like, what does it mean? What are some of the things that you enjoy most about, our relationship together? And he said something to me that surprised me. He goes, when you apologize. And I was like, really? And I was like, well, tell me about that. He goes, it's one of the most manly, masculine things I think a man can do is to own his mistakes and to ask for forgiveness when he does screw up. I think it's a weak man who just allows his ego to stand in the way of best relationships because they don't want to ever admit that they're wrong. So I think that connection piece, that humble piece is a big deal. But I also think it's really never being stagnant, never being okay with the status quo as far as our personal development, our growth. And if you really look at what the Dad Edge is, I mean, yeah, we talk dad stuff, sure. But it's really personal development through the lens of a man, a husband, and a father.
What I'm hearing is being a good dad is just an extension of being a good man.
Totally.
And when you think about it that way, it's inspiring for me to hear that, because like you, and I said it before we hit, record, I was not given the greatest blueprint, as a kid. As a matter of fact, I was given a terrible blueprint. And any significant experience with your kids is fresh and new. You know what I mean? It's like, so how you deal with that is going to be contingent on how you deal with your life, how you deal with life, right? And like, if you are reactionary and you have a short fuse and you project your feelings onto others just because that's what you fucking do, your kids are going to experience that, period. So I like, this is like actually really, for me, I'm like, wait a second, it's not about it is about being a great dad, because I aspire to be a great father every single day, and there's days where I fall short, without a doubt. There are days where I'm sitting at the dinner table and I've made that commitment and I'm just fucking out and I'm just not there. My kid is like, Dad, I want to show you a magic trick. And I'm like, man, I want so badly to just be totally tuned in with my 4-year-old trying to show me a magic trick. And and it's hard. It's really hard. And that sometimes I'll walk away from that and I'll say, man, am I a great dad or not? And what you just confirmed for me is, no, dude, the pursuit is there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The pursuit is there.
The pursuit is there. We will execute things 100%, but will we do it 100% of the time? No. There are times where I'll give you a great example, man. My 7-year-old had a basketball tournament, and I was videoing like a lot of his stuff, and then in between videos and stuff like that, my wife and I were texting each other, and I got distracted. And, of course, like texting your wife and you're like, oh, I'll check my email real quick. Oh, I'll check social media. Oh, he's on the bench right now.
You just got dragged in.
Right. He's on the bench right now. He's not in there. So I'll just go ahead and kind of catch up on a few things. And when he gets back in there, I'll get on there. Well, what do you think happened when we got in the car?
He's like, Dad, I saw you on your phone. You weren't paying attention.
He did. And so he didn't see me watch him when he was playing because he was playing. So he's looking up at me while he's on the bench. And he goes, and I literally just did a podcast on this. Like, don't be on your device when your kids are playing sports, right? Because they're going to see it.
So true.
And it was like 1 week later, like he calls me out on it. And I'm like, oh my God. And I was like, buddy, and here's the ego, right? I was like, buddy, I was watching your game. He goes, well, when I was looking up at you, you were on your phone. I go, were you looking up on me on the bench or while you're playing? He's like, on the bench. I was like, I try to defend it. I was like, I was watching you while you're playing, but I was on my phone while you're on the bench. And he goes, well, why? I was like, I was texting Mom, and I checked my email, and then when you got playing again, and then in my mind, I'm like, you're so full of shit. Like you're being a dumbass right now. But I literally didn't own it until I put him to bed that night. And when I put him to bed that night, and this was literally just a handful, this was last weekend, I go, Colton, I need to thank you and I need to apologize to you. And he's like 7. So he's like, well, why? And I go, because you called me out, and rightfully so. I was on my phone during your game. And here's my promise to you. I will never be on my phone during your game again. I was like, so phone will stay out in the car. I was like, it was a really good reminder, and I appreciate you reminding me that I shouldn't really do that. Whether you're on the bench or not, whether you're in the game or not, I need to be watching because I want to watch. I don't want to miss. And I was like, so I'm sorry, and that won't happen again. And he was just like, well, you don't need to apologize. It wasn't that bad. I was like, yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. I was like, it was that bad. I was like, because you remember it. And I don't want you to look back on game times and your dad's in the stands, and that's how you remember me. Mm. And I don't want to miss even an opportunity with your game. But like, so I think, are we ever going to do this thing right 100% of the time? It is absolutely impossible. But I think as long as we're in that pursuit, right? We're growing, we're learning, like I did martial arts for 12 years of my life. I competed, I did, we did tournaments and all kinds, and I didn't win every match, I mean, I wrestled in high school, didn't win every match, but there was that pursuit. You constantly show up to practice. You refine those skills, you refine the takedowns, you do different things to learn. It's never going to be perfect, but I think there can be that pursuit of trying to make it the majority, if that makes sense.
Dude, I'm like you're saying this, and I just got a glimpse of I take my kids to karate every Thursday, and half the time, man, I'm on the phone.
Yeah.
And I'll look up and I'll see Finn look at me.
Cool name, by the way.
Thanks. And I'm like, oh, fuck, man.
Yeah.
And I'm just here to say that, like, God, man, it makes me emotional because I know that those kids, I've said this before in the podcast, but it's so true. And I have to remind myself because I'm not perfect here. I'm not even close to all those kids want, all those 2 boys want in life is my attention.
Yeah.
And their mother's attention.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all they actually like. They want their friends. They want their Pokemon cards. They want to go to karate. They want to ski on Sundays. But more than all that, my boys want me to tell them I fucking love them.
Yeah.
And I know that. And it makes me sad to think that like that kid looked at me out of the corner of his eye and caught me looking on my goddamn phone. Being a dad is a real privilege, you know? And man, like sharing stories like that, I think there's somebody right now listening to this in the car on their way to work or on their way home from work. And what we just said jabbed them right in the heart. Because it's just so important. We don't need to be distracted from our children. We choose to be. I got to say that to myself.
Yeah.
We don't need to be distracted from our children. We choose to be, What are some, man, that got me good, dude. What are some things that we can share, potentially habits that we can share to implement to help us just be better as husbands, fathers, ultimately men, but in the realm of this husband and father thing that you've been working on for the last 10 years?
Marriage is one of my most favorite things to talk about. I heard you talking about your wife, and you and I could like literally be cloned how we talk about our wives. I tell my boys, last night I had my arm around my wife, and we're putting my oldest one was saying goodnight to us, and he's 17. And I go, Ethan? And he goes, I know you love her. Because like he knows the voice tone and everything. And like I'll be like, Ethan, and he'd be like, I know you love mom. I publicly compliment my wife constantly in front of the boys. So let me talk about marriage first. When it comes to needs, right? Men and women have three different needs. Men need to be appreciated, respected, validated. That last one's hard for us to hear, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's something that's in us, you know. And then women need to feel seen, heard, and safe. And if you ask most men, do you know your three basic needs in a relationship? They don't know, and they don't know their wives. And wives don't know their own, and they don't know their husbands either.
So can you just repeat them again?
Yeah, so men need to feel respected, appreciated, validated. Women need to feel seen, they need to feel heard, and safe. So those three things. And if you are able to fulfill those three needs for your wife, she feels very fulfilled, she feels loved. And the flip side, if she can do that for you, then you feel loved. I think communication is, anytime I do any type of marriage coaching whatsoever, I can almost say things before the guys do now. I'm like, if you can improve one thing in your relationship with your wife, what would it be, and what do you think it is?
I know what it actually is. I know the best thing to do because it's strong in our relationship. But being there for her, protecting her.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely one of them. Communication is the one I hear all the time.
That's the one I think is the number one and most important thing.
Yeah,
isn't it?
It is. Like that is the problem that men that I've worked with, and we've helped over 4,000 guys in the past 7 years, and we actually have data on why they want to come and do life with us because they fill out an application first, and 80% of men who come and do life with us and in Dad Edge have identified marriage as one of the reasons that they're there, and communication is the number one most ultimate important thing for them. But the thing is that men and women, quite frankly, we speak different languages. We just do. And a lot of times what our relationships feel like is she's speaking French and we're speaking Chinese. And it's hard. It's very, very hard. If you could improve one thing within marriage, it's being able to be a really damn good listener and to let her know that you're listening. Like, that's where the seen and heard thing comes from. The other thing that's interesting too, from a psychological standpoint, if you can make her feel seen, make her feel heard, that last one, say, falls like a domino, which is pretty cool. So a lot of men are like, well, I listened to her. I talked to her. I was like, but are you able to identify what she's feeling? When she's talking, are you listening for words, or are you looking for words and emotions? And they're always like, well, I'm listening for the words. I'm like, well, you have to understand that in order for her to feel seen and heard, then you got to look for that emotional part too, because women are emotional beings, and so are men to some degree, but more so with women. One of the biggest pitfalls that I ever see is when a man tries to fix a woman's problems, when she comes and vents.
I learned that quick.
Right?
Especially when she was pregnant. Just don't try to fix it.
Yeah, don't try to fix it. The other thing too is I think that's really important that I've noticed is that if you do everything right, like if you do everything well outside of the bedroom is a direct result of everything else that's going well in the relationship. Versus like, well, I got to focus on intimacy before all this other stuff because that's what I want. I see that one really, that one falls flat a lot, especially for guys and especially for women. They don't like it, and the guys don't like the results of it. As far as one more thing with marriage, one of the most simplest things in the world to tweak in your marriage is a date night. I know it sounds oversimplified, but you have to go out as a couple. You can't be constantly mom and dad 365, 24/7. It's important. You got to do that, right? We're never off the clock with that. But we need, buckets of time, containers of time where it's just her and I, you and your wife, and getting back to what it means to be a couple and having deeper conversations besides, what are we doing for dinner next week? And what are the kids' schedules for sports this weekend? And what chores need to be done around the house? And my wife and I, every time we go out on a date, we always have a list of like 4 or 5 questions that we're going to ask each other. And we don't know.
God, I love that.
Oh, it's great, man. Like I just asked my wife, not too terribly long ago, if you and I were sitting on our deck 20 years from today, and we were just enjoying the weather, and we both had a glass of wine, and we cheersed to an amazing life and the past 20 years that have been amazing. What had to happen that hasn't happened yet? And my wife was like, oh my God, such a good question. And the cool thing about that type of question is it's called a generative question. It's a connected question. It's an intimate question because it generates images and visions and intimacy and connection, because as soon as I ask that question, she's automatically thinking about all these amazing things that we could do as a couple, and she's imagining them with me. So like being able to get really curious and be really good at just asking questions about her and about you guys and depth. I think that's what's missing in a lot of marriages, because we talk about the high level stuff a lot.
I am with you 100% that a date night is so important. And, you know, my wife and I will go through spurts where we're very, very good about it, and then we'll fall off. And, you know, we'll have to remind her, you know, it's the last quarter of 2023, terrible date night. Terrible commitment to date night. And so I said to her, whether she likes it or not, 2 date nights a month, and because I know if I say 4, I'm not going to be able to make it, and I want to be a man of my word. So 2 date nights a month. But one other thing that I would add to that, you know, you've been with your wife 18 plus
20 years now, yeah.
20 years. Yeah, Donna and I are celebrating in April. We'll have celebrated 19 years together, and
It's awesome.
yeah, so we're on the same trajectory. You've got more kids than I, and you started younger, but I have to say that the absolute number one, like unequivocal secret sauce to our relationship is communication no matter what. Just in your face, like fearless communication. And I know that is hard predominantly for most men, to just have an emotion, get in touch with it, get in tune with it, and have the balls to tell your wife how you're feeling in a vulnerable place. You're like, it's in your mind, for whatever reason, men are wired to just think it's going to like fucking disappear. And I know that does not happen. It just simply does not happen. So if you're a dude and you're listening to this and you have a feeling about something that you want to talk to your wife about, but you think that, you know, it's miraculously just going to fucking disappear if you just sweep it under the rug, you're wrong. It's not going to disappear. As a matter of fact, it's going to grow. It's going to grow like a weed. And so that piece, the communication, I call it upfront, in-your-face communication. So it's just like, no matter what, you're feeling something, you know it's going to suck to say it, you know it's going to potentially, you know, turn into an argument or even a fight. But in my opinion, if you don't say it, it will own you and the relationship.
If you want, I got a story that might really hit that home. This
Let's go.
Another vulnerable story, one I'm not proud of, but it is what it is. But it's the same thing. I mean, a lot of men feeling any type of emotion, right? Sometimes the thing that halts us from sharing it is like, well, I don't know how she's going to take it, or I need to protect her from this, or I don't want to be rejected, or some way, somehow they just have this perception of like, she's going to see me like this. 2017 is a really tough story, and it was a very tough season. So I was training for an ultra event. I don't know if you know who Mark Devine is. He's the founder of SEAL Fit, but he's former Navy SEAL. He runs a program out in California for citizens who want to try out the Navy SEAL Hell Week. Mm-hmm. He calls it Kokoro. So it's 50 hours, and I got to be really close with Mark, and so I was like, I'm gonna do this, and I trained for like a year for it, 50 hours. It's like no joke. So I got really dumb with my workouts, and I'm talking like I was training like 3.5, 4 or 5 hours a day, just completely frying myself. And it was the beginning of February in 2017. I went for a crazy workout and just literally decimated like my body. And that night I couldn't sleep. And I didn't know it at the time, but I just completely fried my adrenal system out. Well, the next night I couldn't sleep. And then the next night. And over a 33-day period, I was sleeping on average 1 hour to, if I got lucky, it was 3 hours. But I was sleeping 1 hour to 3 hours per night for 33 straight days. Went to my doctor, ended up in the emergency room a couple times. I lost 30 pounds. Like, it was awful.
Rhabdo?
What's rhabdo? So.
Oh, rhabdo is like when your body just kind of shuts down from exertion.
Oh yeah, it was just done. Like, it was fried, and it was almost like it was overstimulated, and it was this vicious cycle of I couldn't sleep, and because of that I couldn't sleep. It was just really weird. So docs had tried everything on me. They tried Ambien and Lunesta and Trazodone. Nothing would work. And what really sucked is after like 33 days of that, like I ended up in the hospital. It was horrible. And then finally after that, I started to get my sleep back to normal. But every night I had like this horrible anxiety that it was all going to start all over again. Because there's a lot of scary shit out there, but staring at the wall for 6 hours a night with nothing but your thoughts when it's quiet, that will freaking drive you crazy. And I went to a counselor because I felt like I couldn't get my head right after it, and then he diagnosed me with PTSD. I was like, PTSD? I was like, I haven't been to war or anything like that. He's like, yeah, but that's a serious traumatic event, man. Like, that's a long time to go through that. So I went to counseling for 8 months for PTSD. And every night I just had like this, and even during the day, like I just had like this anxiety that it was all going to start all over again. And I never communicated that with Jessica. I was I wouldn't say I was cold, but I was distant. I didn't want to worry her. Like, I wanted to protect her. I was like, I don't want her to know like I'm freaking out over this. I don't want her to know how stressed out I am over this. But what I didn't realize is all my actions were stating that. And I'll never forget this, man. I've known Jess for 27 years. We've been married for 20. She sat me down one day. We've got a great relationship. She's never told me before or since what she told me one day. She sat me down. She held my hand. She's like, I need to tell you something. And I'm like, okay. She goes, it's really hard for me to say, and I never thought I would say this out loud. And I've been thinking about it for a really long time, so I know it's true. She's like, but you're losing me. And I'm like, what? And she's and that's not like us. I was like, what do you mean I'm losing you? She goes, you're different. You're not the guy I married. Like, you're cold, you're distant, you're not letting me in. Like, I know something's going on with you. And every time I ask you about everything, you're fine. You're fine, or you got this going on or that. What is going on? Like, you're not talking to me. Talk to me. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm losing you though. And she's like, well, I'm not like packing my bags yet or anything like that. She goes, but I'm starting to think about life without you. And I was like, holy shit. And I was like, all right, well, if you want to know what's going on, here it is. And I told her like everything, like all my stress about it, my anxiety about it, sleeping again. And like, was this going to start all over again, getting through PTSD? She knew about that, but she didn't know the depths of it. And I'll never forget this, man. She held my hand. She's like, you should have told me this a long time ago. Like, it's okay. It's really okay. She's like, do you understand our relationship at all? And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, Larry, like, I'm your wife, but I'm also your teammate. Like, you're my king. I'm your queen. And there are times in life that we have to go to battle together. And unless you let me in on the battle plan and what we're facing, I can't help. So there are times where I'm going to have to shoulder some of like our load sometimes, emotional, physical, or whatever. And guess what? There's going to be times that you're going to have to shoulder it. But we got to be willing to talk about it. And if you're just going to shut me out because you want to protect me, that's not going to work. And dude, that was like the biggest wake up call of like, telling myself I shouldn't tell my wife this because of this, or I shouldn't share this because of that. I share everything with her now. And here's the funny thing. It's actually made us closer, and it's connected us more. We actually have more intimacy. We actually have more sex. Like, and I would have thought it would have gone the other direction, but it hasn't.
2017, I had the exact same situation.
Are you serious?
In 2017, I started getting just the most abnormal symptom of something. And I didn't tell anybody about it because I was like, okay, I'm just feeling these things. Who knows what it is? But I started to really internalize it. I was extremely tired, and my hands were swelling up, and my feet were swelling up. My joints were getting swollen at times, and I'd feel my gut was going, and I'd kind of get like weird dry eyes and this weird film on my teeth, and I just like couldn't figure it out. And I was really trying to just like, I don't want to bug anybody out, but at a certain point, it started to get really bad. And so I told my wife, I said, hey, I don't know what's going on, but something's really bad. Like, I think I might have cancer or something, and she's like, what? And I was like, I just don't know, I don't know what it is. And I didn't like get the immediate response that I was like hoping to get from her. So I kind of internalized it again. And I went a year thinking I was dying and not talking enough because I thought I was going to be bothering her. And then, ultimately, I mentioned it to her, and she was like, she knew that I'd gone to the doctor a few times, and all my blood work came back fine, everything was normal, and she's like, babe, like this is. Anyway, I found out ultimately I had chronic Lyme disease, which, like, thank God I got diagnosed with that because my wife, my mother, like all the people in my life that I actually ended up sharing it to and had a similar experience with you, or like I finally like shared it, they thought I was losing my mind because of all the results that had come back. And then finally I met a doctor, but it's so weird that you had that experience in 2017, brought my wife and I definitely closer because I was honest with her. I was like, hey, you know, like I was nervous to share this with you because I don't want to be the guy that's complaining about my, you know what I mean? Like I'm your husband,
Right.
you know, I'm your husband, you know, and so I mean that's such a great lesson for anybody listening too, you know, like you're in a partnership, man. You know, like there's some people that don't even say wife or husband; they just say partner. You know, I don't understand what I don't
get that.
I don't really get that,
Yeah.
like the partner thing.
Yeah.
But I get that. You know, like I would never call my wife my partner; she's my wife. But I understand the partner component of it. You know, when your wife said, you know, we're a team. You know, like I would rather be on no one else's team. You know.
Yeah. Same.
Why don't we just talk about fatherhood before we wrap this thing up?
So just the importance of what to do with fatherhood and that type
Yeah,
of thing.
just you know, like if there's a couple of gems that you can drop for us in your experience of this like idea for pursuit of great fatherhood.
So like I said, I have 4 boys, you know, 17, 16, 10, and 7. I think I'm one of those people that I can tell you if something has worked if I can look hindsight, you know, because I've learned a lot of different things as far as communication, connection as a dad, and implemented them, and I can look back and see the breadcrumbs and know, I think at this point, what has worked really well and the things that haven't. And I will tell you that, you know, if anybody ever, you have one son that's 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how old's the other one?
8.
It's so funny. That's the same spread as my 2 older ones. But if anyone ever tells you, oh, just wait till they're teenagers, they won't want anything to do with you, you know, they're going to be this, they're going to be that. I always tell people now, I'm like, just run the other direction. Because if you can do things right at 6 and 8, you're going to have a much better chance, I in my personal opinion, of a great relationship with them when they're teenagers. I mean, even now, like
what does that mean? Do things right?
So like, for instance, kids spell LOVETIME, right? So spending, I'm a big fan of one-on-one time, you know, whether it's you know, I just took my
Have you always done that?
Yeah.
Since they were
little. Yeah. Big one-on-one dates, with my kids are a very big deal. And then once a year, I take each one of them on a trip. Actually, just a few months ago, me and my oldest were here. We were doing some media, and then we spent 3 days here in New York sightseeing. But I like to do one big getaway with them, you know, just one-on-one every year, and then just for a couple days.
When did that start? How old were they?
Yeah, so my oldest was 6. First thing we did was go to Chicago. You know, and then we did Colorado, and we've done New York now, and my 16-year-old's going to LA with me on Monday to be on Squint's podcast from the Sandlot. So I'm like, hey man, you want to go meet Squints? And we'll go hang out in LA for a day or 2. So things like that. I think when you do a one-on-one, even if it's just like a getaway, like a small getaway, like I'm talking like camping, like it doesn't have to be extravagant, but I firmly believe that you're making a deposit into a core memory. They're never going to forget that, and neither are you, right? We might forget about the other things here and there, but that I think is super important, is a one-on-one small trip getaway every year with your kid, you know. And then I also think the micro small one-on-one, you know, time with your kid. And
day trip.
Or even just like breakfast. Like I took my 10-year-old out to breakfast, you know, before school, and we played Uno and we talked. And we had some of the best conversation just playing Uno and talking over breakfast, and we weren't at home. Like, so things like that. I mean, my oldest had a wrestling meet over the weekend. It was just me and him, and I was like, hey, you want to go out to dinner? And that's also my way of like, I really want to talk and catch up, you know, and just get really into your life. And I honestly think if you can spend time, but not just time, but connected time, get like super curious just about their lives. I mean, Google's great. You can like whatever age your kid is. We actually just created a PDF for guys who have kids between the ages of 6 and 10, and the top 25 questions you can ask them. And they're freaking fun, man.
Gotta send me that.
Oh, I will. They're so much fun. But it's you know, these questions, much like my wife and I use, they're springboards into conversations, you know, into depth and into connection. And if you can be genuinely interested in their life ask them really fun, curious questions about them, reflect back, spend time the way they want to spend time. Like, I think a lot of dads, they want to bring kids into their hobbies, which I think is okay. But I also think what's really cool is like, bring me into yours. You teach me something. You know, my 7-year-old is playing basketball right now. I never played basketball. I'm like, teach me how to dribble, teach me how to shoot. You know, things like that I think are really, really important. But connection, one other thing too that I think is I don't think I think it's on people's radar, but I think you can really, really make hefty deposits every night before bed. I spend about 10 to 15 minutes with each kid, which means my bedtime routine is about an hour. But I always ask, you know, tell me about the best part of your day, you know, or tell me something that made you laugh today. Tell me how you were kind to somebody today. And really what I'm wanting to reflect, I want them to tell me something that they're proud of, something that was a high point for them. What I'm also doing in that moment is I'm training my kid how to mentally get into gratitude, despite their day. They'll probably find 1 or 2 gems in there. I also like to ask a question of what challenged you most today? What'd you fail at today? I want to get them really used to being okay with failure as long as they're learning, you know? So like, well, tell me what you learned from that. And then I'll ask them a question of what are you most excited about tomorrow? Or so tell me something that's on your horizon that you're super stoked about. Because when they tell me like, oh, well, tomorrow I've got this and that going on, I mean, that's going to be the first thing I ask them when they walk in the door. So interested dads are interesting, I think.
We do at the dinner table, and the boys have been kind of like hit or miss with it over the last few months, unfortunately, but we gun for it every night. We do rosebud, thord, and seed. Yeah. And, you know,
Wait, the last one was what? Seed?
Seed.
What's
how you're helping someone.
Okay. Yeah.
Seeds. How you know, I kind of made that one up.
That's good. Yeah.
But that's, you know, I love, you know, the rosebud, thord, and seed. It's so interesting to watch a little child like try to think about something to say, and it's you know, it's obviously fun for me and my wife to like see this like 6-year-old kid sort of being like, how did I help someone today? Because that's the one that they're always like stuck on, like, how did I help someone today? I always have a physical, a mental, a family, and I try to do a financial goal every year. And I'm not a New Year's resolution guy. I'm not like, I'm never going to do this again. But I do like to have my sights set on a certain target in the pillars of my life that I think are important. And this year for family was committing to one-on-one time with my kids.
There you go.
And, you know, it's so interesting that we've always been a unit, you know, like my wife worked her ass off before we had kids. And then once she got pregnant, we decided that for her career, she was going to stop working and be a mom hardcore. And she's the best mother to ever. I mean, I'm sure your wife is a close second, but but my wife is a damn, like, she is just a thoroughbred mom, you know. And now she's actually getting back to work. I'm really proud of her. She's getting a real estate license. She got a real estate license. She's going after it. But there's just so many things that you said that I think are I know for sure. Anytime I hear family, I don't question. I know it's happiness for me.
Yeah.
It's just happiness. And it might not be for you listening right now, but it can be, you know. And I'm so grateful that you're out there sharing this information after you did something that would potentially really rub people the wrong way.
Sure.
You know, and you're out there and you're helping people be better humans, specifically dudes, you know, in the dad and the husband arena, which I have found to be the happiest place for me to live. You know?
I agree.
Like, I just really do love being like, if there's anything, if you know, you could take away pretty much anything from me, but if you threatened to take away my connection to my wife and children, I will kill you.
Yeah.
That would be the only one. That would be the only thing that would take me to a point where that's the one thing you can't take away. And I'm so lucky I feel to have that piece of my life and be very clear about it.
Yeah.
Super clear, right? Because like ultimately, are we working to live or are we living to work?
Yeah.
You know, like what is it? Dude, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I really
Thanks for
can't.
having me. I'm gonna have you on mine too. So
I'd love that.
Yeah.
Where can we find you?
All you have to do is Google The Dad Edge. Everything will come up. You can go to thedadedge.com. I have all my podcasts there. Way to connect as well. A couple of free trainings in there too. So like some of the things I talked about, like good questions to ask your kids, good questions to ask your wife. I've got PDFs on all that good stuff. Instagram is The Dad Edge. Pretty much anywhere is The Dad Edge. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Larry, really, really great way to kick off the year, man.
Yeah.
You know, I think serious value today.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
brother.
you. Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you. And there you have it, guys. I am going to literally implement half the things that we talked about here, and you know, it's really gratifying for me to hear Larry talk about some of these attributes or some of these characteristics of what it means to be a great man, husband, father, that I'm either doing them or working on doing them. And I'm just here to say that if you are in any way, shape, or form questioning your ability to be a great father, great man, great husband, just know that every single day you get an opportunity. Every single day you get an opportunity to do or not. And I think this podcast is giving us a grip of things to do in pursuit to be a great human being that ultimately projects into your relationships with your family. So I am just like filled with gratitude. If I, you know, I could just call it a day and go to sleep right now. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean the world to me if you shared it with your friends and family. It really would. It would mean the world to me. And you know, I say it after every single episode, but that's just the truth, right? Like we don't do advertising on this podcast. I am paying for this podcast myself because I really all I care about is for you guys to share the podcast. And if you're feeling up for it, give us a 5-star rating and review. That would be super nice. Cherry on top, would love that. But if not, all good. Just hit share in when we post this on social media. Share it with your community, and because I just know the value is just you know, it's awesome. And Larry, I can't thank you enough for being on again, brother. Really, thank you so much. Check out Larry and his podcast, and just go to the Dad Edge and pick up some of the stuff that we shared. I'm sure there's a ton more that we didn't go over. But until the next one, y'all, I appreciate y'all. I love ya. Peace.